Brand nerds, we are still in the first quarter of the year and we are coming back with some hits, LT. Today, we are going to talk a bit about the name of our podcast as a frame for our guest. Y'all already know what it is. We are Brands, Beats, and Bites. Sometimes we have guests that can talk about brands. Sometimes we have guests that can talk about bites on the text. And sometimes we have folks on the show who can talk about beats. LT, this next gentleman can talk about all three of them. He's got a stellar brand background. He's a CMO. He's a CTO, so he's got bites. And the area where he does business, LT, sometimes you hear beats in the background, the music. So he's got all three of these things working. And then there's a bonus, brand nerds. You all know I'm from Detroit. I think very highly of Midwesterners, very highly. This gentleman happens to be across a little lake from where I grew up in Detroit. He's from the Chi-Town area. And by the way, brand nerds, if you've never been to Chicago in the summer, you have to go. Like summertime Chi is actually a thing. There's only one thing I'm going to say that I have an issue with before even going into introducing our guest, LT, and that is I am a Pistons fan. I am a Lions fan, and I hate all Chicago sports. Aside from that, LT, tell us who we have in the building today.
Oh, I will do that in a second, D, but I have to second your Chicago in the summertime. There's no better place than Chicago in the summertime because people really appreciate it there too. So yes, DC, we have Dan Ali in the house today. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to have you, Dan. And so, okay, branders, Dan has a unique and super cool background, which DC did a great job of alluding to. Let's get into it. So Dan is a Pakistani immigrant who spends most of his formative years in Naperville, Illinois, as DC alluded to, just outside of Chicago. And he attends Indiana University, where he goes to the IU Kelley School of Business and earns a degree in business economics and public policy. So the beginning of Dan's career is in retail, where he starts as a management intern at Macy's, which is prestigious, by the way, and then moves over to Toys R Us, where he spends 2 years in customer service and then becomes a store manager, where brand nerds, he is the youngest manager nationwide and leads 40 plus employees to highest output metrics in the region. So that's really impressive as a youngin, D, we like to say, right?
Youngin.
And also, he's already thinking like a marketer. He proposes and helps deploy the Digital Rewards R Us program, which is really cool. So then he gets a very interesting new opportunity moving out of retail and joining United Airlines as a revenue management analyst before being promoted to senior analyst. So, okay, brand nerds, is now the late 2010s, and Dan has really figured out how important analytics is, and he is leaning all the way in. He joins Groupon first as a senior analyst, and then he's promoted to global finance manager before being promoted again to head of strategy and analytics, where he is instrumental with other team members in helping take Groupon Plus from thousands of transactions a quarter to millions, all happening in less than a year. So after this excellent success, Dan moves onward and upward, becoming senior director and head of global strategy and analytics at Gympass. Gympass works with more than 15,000 companies, helping their employees move, eat, and sleep, and feel better with access to fitness and wellness partners in subscriptions that cost up to 50% less than traditional memberships. So in this role, Dan hires the strategy and analytics team from scratch. He redesigns all underlying code to be usable and develops most of the reporting used by the company every day, which helps transform the company into a true data-driven culture. So, of course, with this great work, he earns a promotion, becoming VP head of global strategy and analytics. And that's globally, by the way. And that's also with finance, operations, product, and marketing. First reporting to the CFO and then the CEO, where he's integral in key decisions for country expansion, fundraising, and growth. So now Dan goes the entrepreneurial route, where he becomes founder CEO of AnyCurb, where they create a proprietary algorithm identifying off-market homes that would sell with a market price offer. And after 2 years, they are acquired. So while still at AnyCurb, Dan also becomes GM of Blink Health, where he and his team build and deploy transformational real-time data packages to pharmaceutical manufacturers. He leads marketing and design, including the renaming of Blink's pharma program, which he renames to BlinkRx, and creates a GTM, which is a go-to-market playbook for the pharma field team, resulting in hypergrowth. In early 2022, Dan joins XPass, which is part of a larger company, Exponential, as their president, and then he transitions to be chief marketing and technology officer for Exponential, the big company. So Exponential Fitness is the largest global franchisor of boutique health and wellness brands. Through its mission to make boutique health and wellness accessible to everyone, the company operates a diversified platform of 10 brands, including Club Pilates, which is the largest Pilates brand in the US, Cycle Bar, the largest indoor cycling brand, and Stretch Lab, the largest assisted stretching brand, all in the US. So brand nerds, we are really excited for this one. Welcome to Brands, Beats, and Bites, Dan Ali.
Dating profile. This is good. Oh, gosh.
Not too bad. Not too bad.
That's good. I liked it. I liked it.
Good stuff, Dan.
Me down memory lane. No, I think it's awesome. I think the cool thing and cool opportunity you have in the United States is the ability to just move around and find what you love. You know, like typically in a lot of countries you have this fear of just like moving around, and here it's so easy to keep exploring until you find what really resonates with you. And I think it took me, I loved everything that I did across the path, but I found myself in a position where I love walking in every day. When I leave on Friday, I can't wait till Monday. My girlfriend hates that I work on Saturdays and Sundays, but it's because I love it. And I think it's just really important to find something. And transitioning from a data-driven role, and we'll talk more about this, to a marketing role is pretty difficult. And people do that through going back and getting their MBAs, and it's a difficult path to take it from actually transitioning your career, particularly if you're really, really good at something.
Mm-hmm.
But it does create the foundational path to get to marketing. Because being a marketer, as you already know, is very, very difficult and ever changing. And finding what makes you really special, it's hard to define. You're either that person that can make Nike ads and believe that the impressions are leading the way, or you have to be a very scientific, have a scientific approach to it, or mixing the data and the art of it all and bringing it together. And there's just so many different mixes out there, and you overlay that with the world of marketing that's just constantly changing, new platforms coming in at a complete new rate. And so I think you have to almost move around to find what you love. I have a very strong perspective that I have. And I love what I do, and I don't foresee myself leaving. I just love it. So, yeah.
Excellent, brother. So, Dan, whenever LT does his opening, I like to watch the face of our guest, because it's a bit like you were about to be brought on stage, and the MC is laying down. This is who was about to step to the mic. So all of that you did, they're great. LT does a fantastic job of that, but he's stating what has been done, the facts of the game. But there were a couple of things that he said that I have a personal connection to. I didn't realize that I would, Dan. One is the fact that you were at the Kelley Business School at Indiana University. My mentor, one of my mentors, his name is Steve Horn. He graduated from IU, Kelley, the Kelley Business School there. And without him, Dan, I'm not here talking to you now. So that's one connection. That's one. The second connection is you, in your early days as a pup, started at Macy's, a retail place, in management. I started as a pup, Dan, at a retail place in Michigan called Hudson's. It was called J.L. Hudson's. Like a Macy's, it's long since been purchased and turned into something else. But I too started there. And then my third connection is this, before I get into the get comfy question, is one of my trainers was trying to tell me about assisted stretching. And I'm like, what the hell is assisted stretching? Like, I know how to stretch. Don't be talking to me about assisted stretching. Dan, Larry, brand nerds, once you've had a session of assisted stretching, you're never going back. You're never going back. So those are my three connections before I get into my question around.
Hey, Dan, DC is expensive. He's expensive as a spokesperson. Just letting you know now. That was a really good call out for you.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah, we'll send you the invoice, brother.
I'm
right.
expecting
So,
you.
next section is get comfy. I was gonna ask you a question, Dan, but after hearing you talk, I'm gonna ask a different question. And it's one that I ask folks in Atlanta who are not from Atlanta. Here's what I ask them, Dan and LT. I'll be out. Someone will ask me where I'm from. I'll tell them I'm from Detroit, but I've been here long enough, longer than I've lived anywhere in the world. So this is like home. I consider myself an adopted AT alien. And I ask them when they're from somewhere else, Dan, I say, what were your perceptions of what Atlanta would be like? And how did that compare to the reality after you moved here? What's the difference? So Dan, I'm going to say this to you, brother. You being in the U.S., did you move here in the U.S. or were you born here in the U.S.?
No, I moved from Pakistan.
Okay, you moved from Pakistan. Okay, all right, got it. How old were you?
I was 9.
9. Okay, got it.
Wow.
So okay, so you were old enough. Based on your thoughts, you're chilling in Pakistan, all right? And now the family says, "Yo, Dan and your siblings, we're moving to the U.S. We're going to Naperville." All right. So based on what you thought it would be like being here in the U.S. versus actually being here, what's the difference? What's the delta?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, we moved to Devon Street. So like I'm from a Pakistani background. So there's a street in Chicago, the Chicagoland area called Devon Street. It's where you have all the restaurants. So what you'll see a lot is when people move to a certain neighborhood from like Pakistan, you'll see them move and associate to areas that are very, Pakistani, just general.
Okay.
So growing up until I was 9, I lived in Pakistan. There's a part I lived in the UK. But when I moved to America, the whole, what America's known for is big, right? So when we got picked up by my uncle, he took us to his apartment. I remember getting to the apartment and looking up at the building, and I thought he owned the entire building. Because your mindset is like they own everything, right? So you're gonna walk in, you're gonna get your own apartment. You and your sister is gonna have her own apartment. You're gonna have your own apartment. Your parents are gonna have their own apartment. And we walked into a two bedroom apartment where now we were all sharing, right? And so like there was an instant just like, whoa, like this is actually different because everyone perceives it as big, right? Now, food wise, everything is big, right? We all know that, and there's healthier food outside of the US. But in terms of like living spaces, we always thought of big and huge. And so that was my first intro into that.
Interesting.
Yeah. That is.
Yeah. So I've got a couple follow-up questions. Larry, anything?
Well, keep going, D.
All right. So spell the name of the street, Devon. How's it spelled?
That's Devon, Devon Street. Yeah,
Devon Street. Okay.
I'd say the best Pakistani food you can find in America, honestly, is on Devon Street.
Good to know.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you. I've not been there before, but the next time I'm in Chicago, brother, I'm going.
I know.
I'm going.
Wonderful. And I live in Newport Beach, California. So you got to think Pakistan, Devon Street, Naperville, Newport Beach, California. And so like I always like look out my window right now and it's sunny in December. And I just wonder how in the world, you went from, that day zero coming to that building, thinking it's your building, living in anything in America is achievable. Put your mind to it.
All right. So this great segue. Here is what I believe about immigrants coming to this country. They're built different, Dan. All right. So for me, I mentioned, I grew up in Detroit. My mom picked my university for me. So I went to an HBCU, historically Black college university in Alabama from Detroit. Then when I was at the school, literally I was walking around campus for 2 weeks and I did not recognize that people were saying hello to me, good morning, good afternoon, because people don't speak to one another like that in Detroit. So I was truly a fish out of water and I had to grow up. When you talk about people who decide, I'm leaving my home country, I may or may not know the language, I may or may not know the customs, I'm taking my children with me. It's like entrepreneurship on steroids with massive, massive personal implications. yet they do it. So can you tell me a little bit about what you learned from your parents in making that move and what impact that had on you, and if you have siblings, your siblings?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my dad is one of the most studied, like he literally studies nonstop. And so he used to do that as a kid.
What's your dad's name?
My dad's name is Mohammed Merchant. So my dad in Pakistan, similar to the ACT or SAT, in Pakistan, they conduct a test. And in that test, they rank you 1 out of whatever, however many people took it. So it's not like you get a 33, 28 on the ACT, and you actually get rated throughout the entire country. My dad came in second place on that exam. So my dad, when he was younger, got a scholarship to the United States, and his parents couldn't afford the plane ticket. So like he always grew up with that kind of chip on his shoulder, right? And so eventually he found a way to come to the United States, and he was on track to being, a CTO in Pakistan. He came to America and he reset and restarted, right? Because typically what happens is you reset and you restart. So I have a very interesting take on motivation and what drives people's motivation. And I think it's your connection to your parents, to what you said, is extraordinary in terms of motivating you. In my world, it was the fact that I saw my dad and like how he sacrificed his career to build a better career for us. And so that's the chip on my shoulder. If I look at my dad, what drove my dad was he grew up in a home where like they didn't have access to capital to go and achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. And so for him, his success was sending his kids to any school they wanted to go to. And so everyone finds their unique driving force, and they kind of use it and leverage it to achieve whatever they achieve, and use it as a positive thing. And so I think it's interesting because I do think just people are built differently depending on what they've gone through and how big the chip is on their shoulder.
Yes. Can I add in something here? What's extraordinary about your parents, because your mom had to come be part of this as well, like they were doing the ultimate pay it forward, right? Like they were saying, we're going to do whatever it takes to help our children, the next generation, really achieve their dreams, right? And that'll be what'll suffice. That's what you're really saying will suffice for us if we see that happen. So you have a lot of pressure, Dan, which you've obviously fulfilled in a great way, because your folks are saying, hey man, we're setting everything up for you. You better take it and run with it and do the best you can with it. And clearly you have, which is really cool. I just want to add one quick thing. I love the immigrant story, and I love it's your story, Dan. So hopefully you're cool with us sharing this, because we have nothing but the greatest respect and kudos for your folks and you and your family to do what you've done. And that is wonderful about this country. I want to add this point, and this is a very important point for my brother DC. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Warmth of Other Suns, which is by Isabel Wilkerson, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning book. And that book is about the Black migration from the South to the North. And one of the things that came out greatly in that book is that many of the African Americans who left the South, left Jim Crow, awful Jim Crow South in the early 20th century, they were just like immigrants. They literally had to take everything that they knew and pick up and have, I'm going to use, I'm Jewish, Dan, the chutzpah and the determination and the grit to say, I'm going to make a better life for both me and my future. And obviously, D, your folks, and I think your grandparents did that for you in coming from the South up to the North. So the immigrant story is endemic to the United States of America's story. And I think it needs to always be highlighted in a great way. I'm off my soapbox now.
No, I love that. And I think I think every immigrant's experience is also different, right? Like I told you a story of my dad, who grew up in not a very financially secure environment. My mom grew up in a very financially secure environment, but she had an arranged marriage to my dad, and they're together, loving, very, very happy. But she had me when she was 18 years old. And so she dropped out of school, sacrificed it all, right? And she moved. And so that her journey is very different. And so how I got into my career, I don't know if this segues into the future, is I remember when I first moved to America, and I came back from my math class, and I'm extremely good at math now. But back then, I asked my mom for help on something math related, and she couldn't help. She didn't know the answer, so she started
Right.
tearing up. And I'll always remember that day that she started tearing up. And so I have a tattoo on my chest right here, and it's a crown, but on top of the crown, it has the letters SEL, which are for those who write SQL, it's the first three digits or first three letters of the SQL language written in my mom's handwriting, because SQL and learning data really is what set me apart from the crowd. And my mom's handwriting on it relates back to when I was 9 and remembered her tearing up. So I think everyone's story is different. For her, satisfaction is just making sure her kids are happy. And so like, it's just everyone has their own objective. But no, that's great to share that.
What's your mom's name?
Shaista.
Oh,
Spell it.
I love it.
Shaista.
Shaista.
That's it.
Got it. All right. I'm going to say this one thing, and then we're going to move on to the next section. Brand nerds, for those of you who are not people of color or immigrants or from immigrant families. Now, the reality is everyone in America is an immigrant because this is an immigrant country. But for those who think that they are not at all, I want to point out one thing that many people of color and immigrants have witnessed in their lives but don't talk about. And I'm not projecting this upon you, Dan, and your father, Muhammad, but I'm going to talk about my father. My father, he was a brilliant man, but during the era in America, he was not able to fully manifest his brilliance. He couldn't. And so I saw my father at times emotionally and psychologically broken because he knew he had it. He knew he had it. He knew he could blow the fuck up. He knew this. He just couldn't quite figure out how to deal with all of the things that he was fighting against. He just could not. So when children see that, even if they don't fully comprehend what's going on, we feel that. So when we get our shot, I'm sorry, people. If you are between me and what I think I'm capable of doing, and we have to fight that out, I'm thinking about my father. You're not winning that fight with me. I'm going to get it. Yeah. And this is something that we carry forward. So I just want to state that for some of the branders so they understand that. They understand that. Okay, I'm going to go to the next section unless Dan or Larry, you want to say something as regards to that.
Great close on that.
Great.
Cool. All right, here we go. All right, Dan. 5 questions. I hit you with one. Larry hits you with a second. We go back and forth until we arrive at 5. I'm up first. What was the brand experience that you had in your life, Dan? Take yourself back, where it felt like you were falling in love. You could not get enough of this brand. You couldn't spend enough time with it. Couldn't think about it enough. You were just really, really into this brand, almost like a first love. What was that brand or brand experience for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I always think of Lego. So I spent 5 years. I spent 5 years at Toys R Us, so a long time and on and off school. And if you think about like Black Friday, or you think about holidays, every single vendor would come in to mark their product down. The only vendor that would never show up is the Lego vendor. This is you're too early to recognize why Louis Vuitton doesn't promote things online and things like. You're too young, so you don't. As a kid, you're just trying to understand and piece. There you go. There it is. Yeah, you're trying to just piece together and understand. I love Louis Vuitton, Prada. I see like not to segue. I see like these other brands come in, these baby brands that are going to be around for 2-3 years, charge $400 and be done. But these brands live forever. Lego like that lived forever. Barbie got discounted. Yeah, Barbie is a huge brand, right? But Barbie got discounted. And so you begin to go deeper on why Lego would not get discounted. And, you go back to, and I'm going to bounce between brands. You look at Rolex, right? As a brand. Rolex starts creating impressions in your mind from the moment that your parents are carrying you at the airport and you look up at the clock and you ask, what is that? And so
Yeah.
they're not trying to generate a sale
point.
today. They're trying to generate a sale 25 years from now.
Yep.
Right? They're like, so when you're 25, 26, you want to roll. They don't care if you go buy a Rolex at one. And so Lego in itself turns into the same, where you have tons of companies that invent blocks, right? And those blocks may be more digital, more tactile, more colorful, but there's something that you do in a child's mind where you attach them to this particular brand with no significant advertising. You take Nike. Nike is doing massive global ads. They're going out and they're buying out shoes for every NFL player, every like NBA player. They're doing all of this. Tell me one time you've seen Lego on the screen. Tell me one time you've seen Lego in an athletic place, right? They do things that are like Legoland, right? Come here because we want to celebrate your love for Lego.
Yep.
And people love it, to people doing it when they're 60, 70 years old. They do it, they love it, they have it. And so that was the most fascinating brand for me, was Lego, because its lack of discounting, people's attachment to it, and the retention curve always stuck strong. And so that's one that I fell in love with. And it's hard to create a brand like that because it requires such a significant amount of what you would consider marketing investment, but also mind share to get to a point where you own the customer. Like they own the customer. And it's reached a point where if you have children, you want to tell them about it. So the word of mouth marketing is so strong that you want to tell them about it, similar to Rolex, where you want to give your Rolex to your kid, right? There's a thing that's like, keep it going. And so once you get to that stage, you've achieved nirvana. Now you look at a Pepsi, right? And like Pepsi has changed their advertising significantly, because back in the day, it was enough to show a glass with ice and drop the Pepsi in and it's blitzing and it works. And now that type of advertising and marketing for the modern day consumer is not considered to be adequate. It's not what's driving them in. So what do? You either discount your brand or you try to re-innovate your brand. And so companies like Pepsi have moved towards innovating things like a water brand, but their name is somewhat hidden inside it. But Lego has stayed Lego. So since I've been young and until now, I think Legos don't discount. Lego stays Lego. And they find unique avenues to advertise and market that aren't like massily in your face. They're like, if you like us, come see us, but otherwise we don't care, right?
Lego.
So Dan, you hit. I got to add something here. You're hitting on a Lego is a wonderful brand, and by the way, we bring it up in our brand workshops. We have 2-day brand workshops where we talk about brand. That's the whole. We spend 16 hours of talking about brand and brand positioning, and Lego's brand positioning is incredible for all the reasons that you just said. I'm going to take it personal too. As the brand nerds know, and DC affectionately calls his nephew, our son Jake, who's 20-year-old college junior. From the time he was a little pup, when he was running around, Lego store. What he could be. We were living at the Lego store. We went to Legoland, and Jake told me something interesting the other day, D. He was saying, Dad, I don't think I told you this, but he said, with all the social media and all the stuff, he goes, I'm realizing that I need to be off my devices. And I started doing Legos again.
Really?
As a 20-year-old. Just to take, and he said he gets a little zen.
Are you dead ass right now?
I'm swear to God, that's why I'm bringing it up. He gets a little zen. So here's a 20-year-old kid who grew up loving Legos till he was in his, basically a preteen when basketball became everything, and and then superheroes and whatnot. But he actually said he's back to building Legos because it helps relax him and calm his mind and body. So how about that for a brand that you think, oh, you're sort of done with it when you're a kid, but no, even older kids who are that emotionally connected to the brand still see it as something that's really special and still are very much involved with the brand and love it.
Wow. All right, I'm gonna have to talk to nephew about that. I got one comment, and then we're gonna keep it moving to the next question.
Yep.
Dan, as you ask the question, the rhetorical question, have you seen like Legos advertised on TV and that kind of thing? Your point was, no, we have not, yet they don't have to discount. And I'm sitting here thinking, why? Why have I not seen it advertised? And why are they not discounted? And then I thought, when I do see Legos, what do I see? And I was like, oh shit, this is why. With most brands, they show you the widget. And in the case of Lego, the widget is the block. They don't show you that. Lego doesn't show you the widget. They show you the creation.
Yep.
Here is the creation. Now, you got to do the widgets to get this creation, but it's about the creation. That is fucking brilliant.
It is.
That's brilliant.
Think about the three things he mentioned. So you said the creation. For the nephew, it was calmness. And then you want to ask yourself, did the nephew see an impression of a Lego ad? Probably not. Did they go into a store? Toys R Us doesn't exist anymore, right? Essentially.
So we used to go there all the time when the new sets came out, because he's 20 now. It did when he was, right?
So it lasts forever, right? So like those are the magical things where you don't have to receive an ad for it. And I'm sure we'll talk about ads today, but you don't have to receive an ad for it, but it lives rent-free in your mind.
Yep.
Second question. Go ahead, LT.
Yep. Let's go to the second question. So Dan, who is Hatters having the most influence on your career?
Yeah, so one of the best blessings for me in my career, my mentor's name is Guido. He's a CFO at OneTrust. I met him at my time at Groupon, and so I think for everybody that achieves a level of success in their career, DC mentioned this. He has a mentor. He wouldn't be where he is without him. For me, that he is my mentor. And I'll tell you why. Back when I was at Groupon, I was up until that point, halfway through, I was a very analytical and data-oriented person. What you're going to see about analytical and data-oriented people is they have this ceiling, which they're afraid to speak strategically because they're so deep into the numbers.
Yes.
Somebody recognizing that that's the ceiling that's holding you back and gives you an opportunity to speak at the table. Now, you can certainly take your opportunity to speak at the table, but it helps a lot if someone sees the value in it and accelerates it. And so, if I think about him as being that force, he's the one that said, hey, I want you, and at this point, I was going to go join Amazon and leave Groupon. This was one of the moments where I predominantly like to work for smaller, just generally smaller companies, because you move faster, you're responsible for more. I like that sense of responsibility. But I was going to leave to join Amazon from Groupon. And he asked me a series of questions. He said, why? And we had one interaction. I actually stopped by to say goodbye to him. We had one interaction. He goes, why? And I said, well, one, the comp is more, right? That's like the first thing, significantly more. And he's like, okay, give me 5 minutes. He goes to HR, comes back. There's a new comp letter in my inbox. He's like, what's your second? And I go, okay, my second is I don't have enough responsibility. And he's like, well, I'm going to go create this thing called Groupon Plus. I want you to be my number 2. His recognition of talent and his ability to have created this version of me that's able to speak strategically has allowed me to combine data and art together and speak it in a very fluid manner. And so that's why I don't need to have a pre-meeting to talk about what we're going to talk about. I'm comfortable presenting to 1,000 people with zero preparation. It's because I believe so confidently in my analytical mindset that's feed by his mentorship. So I think he's somebody that I'm always going to say unlocked me in my career and the way that I think and created what I am today.
Man, I wish I had a Guido, D.
We all need a Guido.
Yeah. You know what's cool about that, though, Dan? Honestly, I'm saying that half in jest. I've been in situations where, in retrospect, I left the situation too early, and people said to me, "Oh man, we love you here. You shouldn't leave." Da da da. And but they didn't take the extra step that Guido did to make it right for you. And so, while you earned all that you did, because Guido wouldn't have done that for anyone, that's an amazing thing that Guido did that for you. And I'm sure you know it, and that's why you had him as your as somebody who helped you so much. That's really cool.
And the props I'll give him is what he recognized. It always goes down to he didn't just do it because he felt like he was in a good mood, right? And so I'll go back to the example as to why he asked me to come and be his number two. I remember I was sitting in a conference room with it was our CMO at the time was in the conference. There was like 25 people. And there was all these questions that were being asked in that room about the business, et cetera, and questions that haven't been answered for about months. Some questions not answered for 6 months. So I said, whatever, I'm going to pull the numbers. So I pulled out my SQL and I started writing queries on the spot. And I was like, hey, this is the answer. And he goes, what's your name? And I say, my name's Dan. He's like, wow, okay, I've been waiting for this for 6 months. And then I'm like, what's your next question? Boom, 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 answered it. And I'm able to write SQL really fast. But going back to the original story is he recognized that, right? And so it's the mentor will always, great mentors will recognize in snapshot moments the potential of an individual. And that's what really defines like someone that can be a great mentor, because a mentor should not require 2 years of your loyalty and your commitment and all these things. A mentor should say, I see something, I'm going to invest my time in this person.
Love it.
All right, Larry and Dan, what Guido had an ability to do is in one area of a 2x2 box that I put people in. If they're either in one or all of these boxes. I believe that every human being in terms of work capability can be placed into one of these 4 areas 2x2. The top left box, these are the creators. So these folks out of thin air can create an idea, a strategy, something that can change the world or change a workplace. They create stuff. And I don't mean like creators in the traditional sense of they work in advertising or they happen to be musicians. I mean, they are just intellectually creative. All right. So that's the top left. The top right are the editors. So these are folks, Dan, they may not necessarily be able to come up with something totally on their own, but they can take what a creator does and go, ooh, if we do this, that, this, and that to it, oh, it really will sing. So that's the top right. Bottom left, these are the recognizers. I call these the business equivalent of A&Rs in the music business. The A&R person or the recognizer, these are A&R, by the way, Brand Nerds, is artists and repertoire. So these are the folks that can recognize. They can recognize talent. They can recognize partnerships. They can recognize strategies. They're able to recognize these things. That's the
winning strategies in people.
Winning, right, correct, winning. And then the bottom right, these are the operators. So they can execute the things. They know exactly how to take an idea and make it make money. So the most important box, Brand Nerds, is that A&R box. Because folks that don't have the ability to, if Guido doesn't have the ability to recognize Dan's talent and he puts someone else in there like Joe, who's not that good, Guido's not winning, y'all. He might be able to win for a while, but Guido's not going to win for a long time. The other thing on the recognized box, Brand Nerds, is that if you don't get that right, you pick the wrong strategy. The one that wins is right in front of you. You can't recognize it. The agency that can help you win is right in front of you. You cannot recognize it. It is a dangerous box. So hearing you say Guido, I know he's got that bottom lock recognizer and our box on lock, Dan. He's got it on lock.
Agreed.
Yeah. Great conversation. But D, before we hit, we're going to go to question 3 in a second, Dan. I just want to sum up. DC's put forth those 4 boxes on our show a couple of other times, he can't do it enough. And so you should feel honored that he's doing it here, because it's a perfect place, actually, because of the great conversation we're having. So D, go hit question 3.
Shout Guido one time. Right, here we go.
Yes.
Question number 3. Oh, Dan, so many accolades, so many accomplishments. Incredibly impressive. For this next question, I don't want to know about any of that.
We're setting you up, Dan.
I want to know, for the Brand Nerds, What was your biggest F up and what did you learn from it? And let me give you a little more clarification on the biggest F up. Your biggest F up, Dan. You made a mistake. You thought this was going to happen. It did not happen. Here's what we don't want to hear. Well, my biggest F up was when I went in and I talked with my manager about an idea and he said, no, we shouldn't do it. So we missed out on an opportunity. That's not your fuck up. That's theirs. I want to know your F up. You got the floor.
Yeah. So I always think about this. One of my first businesses, and entrepreneurs are always born and have a mind of an entrepreneur at a young age. They're just waiting to execute. And so one of my ideas when I first started innovating new ideas, and I almost put everything I had into it, was this concept called Wed Sim, which was weddings made simple was the concept. So it was Wed Sim. And it came out of an experience of when I was, 20, 21 years old. And I was in a relationship and we were like, oh, like what would it be like? And, in Muslim community, planning weddings and things is very different. It's very accelerated, right? Like, in our culture, you almost have to get like religiously engaged before you start dating in case if someone sees you out and about, they don't think that you're a terrible person, right? And so we started going and exploring wedding venues and things of that nature. And when you go into that particular market, it's very, very convoluted, meaning that a lot of people that have wedding venue halls are asking for cash and because, yada, yada. And you're like, and it creates a sense of stress between you and your significant other, right? So I don't know what percentage of weddings end or marriage planning ends because of that conflict, but it does. So I had this amazing idea, which was to launch this concept called Wed Sim, right? And so I, coming from an immigrant background, I saved a lot of money up until that point, right? Just putting 20, 25% into a piggy bank. So I launched this concept. I try to get, there's this before the age of TikTok. This is before the age of like Instagram going viral. For anyone that lived during that time, we're talking about like AOL, AIM. You have an AIM username. We're going in. And so I dumped almost everything into a website. Okay. At that point, I dumped almost everything into a website. And I went out and then I tried to find the supply after I invested all my capital. So before I even found my capital, I invested all of my earnings up until that point into a website.
Okay.
And I went out to find suppliers, which were the actual vendors. They all required capital. They were like, we're not going to work with you unless you give us $5,000 up front and then we'll become. So essentially my entire.
And you have this wonderful website.
See my website.
See my website. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so I to this day remember how inadequate my planning was, where I dumped, and I think entrepreneurs make this mistake all the time. It's the shiny object fallacy, right? Problem to solve, you'll dump 100% of your capital. And I remember because it was literally 100% of my capital up until that time I dumped into a website. I'm going to take that akin to like, I think about it every day now. And I tell everybody, when you start a business, do it right in the smallest of small scales. And if you can't do it, don't build anything, right? Like don't invest your time, don't invest your energy. If people aren't willing to buy at the smallest scales, they don't. So I think about it every day when I hope that's a big enough F up from my perspective. I dumped everything into it. So otherwise I can name a few relationships for you,
No.
You don't have to go there. That was a really good one, actually.
That was
a really good one.
And you learned from it what?
Bingo.
Yeah. So I think foundationally you learn that make sure the business mechanics work before you invest in the business. So if you go back to like the early, 2010s, mid 2010s, late 2010s, where people were investing money in ideas and websites, right? That world is gone now. In 2009, 2010, nobody cared about ideas and websites.
Yeah.
In 2018, 2020, everyone cared about websites. And then COVID came and now people care about money, right? Like how much money is your business making? So it's really about capitalizing at the right time. But also when you start a company, make sure the business makes sense before you invest in the business. And it doesn't just make sense to you. Someone's willing to pay you $1 for what you're providing.
Mm.
That's great advice. And I think what you're saying too is you can even do the research, however that permeates itself first before you actually dump real money in. That's what you're really saying.
Yeah, you think about it, right? Parent lemonade stands, right? Like I'm not gonna put my kid on a lemonade stand and spend $10,000 on the lemonade stand, hoping that more people will show up. I mean, they could show up, but they'll show up because of the hype, and then they'll stop. And so, like, it really, you got to think about it is like, before I build a lemonade store, I got to make the stand work, and the demand's got to be there for me to open the store. If the demand's not there for the lemonade stand, and I go open a lemonade store hoping for people to now want lemonade more, it doesn't matter. It's a waste of capital.
Mm. One
Great
note
one.
here. Great one, yeah. One note here. Actually, a question. You said that in when you're dating and you're Muslim and you are moving to marriage, did I hear you say things happen quickly or there's some speed? Did I hear you say that?
Yeah,
And if I did,
it's
explain that
hyper.
more because I
Yeah.
don't know about this. Explain it to a brother.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, one, Muslims just generally in our culture are inclined to getting married earlier, right? There's a
Yeah.
huge impetus of getting married earlier. So that's the first piece. The
Okay.
second piece is traditional dating in the cultured Islamic society isn't what you see in traditional day to day.
Okay.
And that means that you don't go and say, "Hey, I want to take you on a date," and then you go on the date, and then you start dating them, and then you introduce them to your parents a year down the line, 2 years down the line when you're comfortable. It's very similar to The Bachelor with no fun part.
Wow.
So they think of it that way, right? So it's like I recognize that there's two ways to go about it in the traditional realm. One, your parents call the shot, right? Because parents not getting along can make a relationship fall apart in some ways, right?
Yep.
Well, there's one way is your parents find somebody that they get along with in terms of parents,
Yep.
right? And they make the assessment that because both the parents get along, the upbringing
kids
of
will
the
get along.
kids are going to get along because they've been
Got it.
raised similarly. So that's one peril. If you
Got
decide
it.
to go the second peril, which is love marriage, right? Which is if you tell a Muslim that these kids are getting a love marriage, a traditional Muslim is going to think about it like in it's not a positive light. It's not something to be celebrated. It's something to be, right? And so then the love marriage is going to go through trials and tribulations, even though, they're just doing what normal people do, and they're going to have a lot more like kind of barriers in their path. And so they may get to the end outcome, but then they're going to introduce the parents together, and the parents are going into with a mindset, which is, I know better than the kids. So already you start one step back. So traditional Muslim is different. Now, when you come to the United States as a Pakistani into America, parents bring that mentality,
Right.
but they bring kids to an environment where they're evolving out of that mentality. So that's what creates the first generation, creates that friction, because you almost, like, my kids are going to be very different. They're going to get to date whoever they want. They're going to live and flourish in whatever they want. But not saying my parents are very, very open, but even my open parents have, a little bit of friction because it's called cultural difference, which to your point, you can't blame them for. But long story short, it's a very, very different system. I date normally now, for all those that are wondering. So,
Thanks for telling us that, right?
I did not know any of that, and I
I didn't
feel
either.
better that I have been informed of something. That is that's really good. I do have one more thing, Larry. You got anything else before we go to the next question?
No, I'm just glad that Dan's sharing this. This is really interesting.
It is. Okay, so Brandon, I want you to listen up. There was something that he said as he was starting Wedson. Was that the name of it?
Wedson. Weddings Made Simple.
Wedson. Okay, got it. All right, so he said he invested all of his money. So brand nerds, for those of you who want to be an entrepreneur, you need to know something. If you are not prepared to push all of your chips in the middle of the table and know that there is a likelihood that you're going to lose them, you're not ready. You're not ready. This is not to say that when you push them in, you're definitely going to lose them. I'm saying that when you push them in, you cannot be overly attached to the outcome that you're getting that back. You cannot be. What you do is you push them in the middle of the table, and the legs holding up that table are you. You're betting. The felt on the table is you. The chips on the table, that's you. And if you have enough confidence, and in some ways, it's a bit not fully normal cognitively. Like you got to be a little nuts to push all of that in the middle of the table and believe that with your God, your creator, or just your own moxie, that you can make what's on that table grow. Don't do it. You don't do it. Don't do it. All right. Okay. Next question, Larry.
You got it. So Dan, regarding technology and marketing, the confluence of those, you have an excellent background to answer this question. So can you tell us where you think marketers should either lean in or best leverage tech, or you can tell us areas that they should be leery or simply avoid?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what you alluded to, my role is I'm a chief marketing technology officer. So it's effectively taking marketing and technology, combining them and creating revenue out of it. And so I'm going to talk through two kind of mechanisms of technology, one within marketing and one within just pure tech.
Cool.
So within marketing, you have the ever-changing visibility portals. So 10 years ago, it was Facebook. 5 years ago, it was Instagram. Now it's TikTok, and it's ever changing. That technology is ever changing. Understanding your medium is the most important thing that a marketer can understand to leverage technology. So what does that mean? So let's take a brand. Let's take Sephora as an example. I love using Sephora as an example because in 2009 or 2010, Sephora could simply say, Sephora is now open, and generate traffic. In 2015, Sephora had to say, new brand in stock. Come on in and try it out. That was the medium because people had gotten bored. They knew the store existed. Now this is a new medium. Now you go to Sephora now, and they need to generate more and more revenue, right? Because that's the game of business. How do you generate more and more revenue? So I have this really strong thesis, and it's not proven, but I'm going to share it here. I've dated in 2010 and I've dated now, and I have loving girlfriends at both times, right? And like it's just to level set and frame the fact that the marketing has changed so tremendously that in 2010, this concept of a boyfriend going into a Sephora and paying for his girlfriend did not exist. The girlfriend went in and bought the Sephora for herself. So she came in and she thought about it. She's like, I have $80 to spend. I'm going to spend 60 because I want to eat later. In 2024, I don't even know where we are right now. In 2024, if you go to TikTok, you see ads that are normalizing a boyfriend paying for 100% of your girlfriend's Sephora haul. So you think about that, right? The translation of the medium has become a boyfriend goes in and buys more Sephora, and so therefore increasing the average order value, because if you have someone else buying for you, right, you're going to spend more. It's just the nature of it, right? Because it's a special experience. And for the man, it's going to feel like, you have to do it because it's the right thing to do. Because if you're not doing it, someone else is doing it, right? So you put yourself in a weird position. So the mediums of that technology has changed the way that people market, and it changes their behavior, but it also psychologically impairs it. Because when you think about the psychology behind it, in 2009, you received knowledge. In 2015, 16, you received a little bit more knowledge. In 2024, you're feeling not good enough. So there's this fine refinedness in the growth of marketing, and I absolutely love my girlfriend right now. We found love on one of the aspects of understanding this whole component of how marketing has changed, and I can just tell in very early stages that she is a marketer at heart because she recognized it. She recognized the fact that if you are Sephora today, are you going to advertise and say this really cool brand's in stock, which people are going to look at and see as an ad? Or are you going to say or normalize the fact that let's just change the culture? let's just make it so that I as a girlfriend should not be paying for the Sephora. Now, not saying that every girlfriend doesn't pay for Sephora, but they're normalizing it, right? So I think that's the beauty of just the marketing component of how technology changes and how you create medium.
Can I just interject one quick thing and a question for you, Dan, because I'm not as familiar with that. Is that a brand positioning shift, an overall strategic brand positioning shift by Sephora? And by the way, my next door neighbor's daughter is a director of marketing over there. Is that a brand positioning shift, or is that something that they did further down the funnel to specifically, talk to folks differently in the TikTok world than before? Because those are two very different things.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just phrase it this way. There's a difference between Iron Man and Batman. And you guys are both Iron Man and Batman, right?
Yes.
So Iron Man comes out and says, I am Tony Stark. I am Iron Man. I'm for the and Batman stays hidden, right? Batman wants to stay hidden. His life is hidden, right? So you can have the same brand positioning as you did in 2009. And that's your Iron Man, right? Like this is my identity, and I'm not going to change my identity. But your Batman is what you're doing to shift culture, to generate more revenue while keeping your brand identity the same. So what I'm going to say is their brand positioning is effectively the same. The people that are posting the hauls aren't them. They're influencers posting the hauls. They're influencers that are influencing the community to intend to spend more.
Right, yeah.
So
I got this from,
exactly. Every business has their Iron Man and every business has their Batman, right? And so to figure out how you use those together is how you win.
Very interesting.
All right, so I've got a cultural point here and a commerce point. So the example you gave, I think you said 2010 versus 2024. And you used the denomination of 2010 for the person going in to buy Sephora for herself, $60, then $20 to get something to eat. All right, so now inflation, $20 in 2010 is $85 in 2024.
100%.
So let's think about this, brand nerds. So what's happened is not only has this shift occurred, which I did not know, Dan. Thank you for educating us on that. But now the person who buys the haul or who is expected to buy the haul, there's more pressure on them simply by virtue of inflation. Okay, so to get the same amount that one was getting from Sephora on their own, expecting that in 2024 is costing more buckaroonies. And if you take that and extrapolate that out over a variety of different elements, well, it's hard out here for a player. Okay. Okay. not for me. I'm engaged. I'm very, very happy. But I got daughters, Dan, they're in their 20s. I could not imagine being a guy dating now, and I'm 25 in business school, and I'm trying to figure out where to get my next meal, and the person I'm dating is expecting a haul from Sephora. We can't do that. We can't do that.
Honestly, you start to appreciate. So one of the unique things about my girlfriend is you mentioned the Midwest, right? So opening the door in Newport Beach is unheard of.
Oh, totally.
Right. So I do that and she appreciates it. When I come home, she has a home cooked meal. And that for me, I don't know anyone here that has that happening for them. So honestly, I feel like the luckiest person on earth, but it's the simple things, right? It's the simple things. And when you start letting like social media run your life, that's why when you can pretty easily connect it to the mental health crisis. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to live because as a man or a woman, it's hard to feel good enough when you're constantly looking at someone doing 10 times as much as you, and then you try to reach those means, but you can't, right? And so it's really hard in today's world to feel like enough. So I think that's the big challenge we have for the next 10 years, people to feel like they're enough.
All right, Larry, we're gonna go to the final question, but I'm just gonna
let's do it.
Point. Since our brother's in Newport Beach, what he says about holding the door is right. I used to live in the area. I was at Fashion Island, and I would hold the door, and these women would be looking at me with their dogs. Now they got their dogs rolling in and out, and you know what I'm talking about, Dan? And they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like they look at me. So that's a he is speaking facts. He's speaking facts. All right. Final question, Dan. What are you most proud of?
I mean, I'm most proud of my parents. It's a very, very cheesy answer, but I think it's extremely difficult for anyone to come into a new world and assimilate.
Mhm.
And you asked me a question, how old was I? I was 9, right?
Yeah.
And it was difficult for me at 9. So I can imagine, how difficult it was for people at their 30s and 40s. So I think I'm most proud of my parents, just being part of American society and accepting me for who I am, and being proud of me. And I hope to carry that forward. It was a cheesy answer, but
No, we love it. It's genuine.
Real. It's real. It's real.
Are
Wow, man,
they still in Naperville, Dan?
they're still in April. Yeah, I love it.
That's great. D,
Great,
that's a good one, right?
That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Not much to add to that.
Yeah.
At all.
So,
At all.
okay, Dan, we're going to go to the next section, Dan. This is our next segment, and this is What's Poppin'? What's poppin', D?
What's poppin'?
Dan, this is our chance to shout out, shout down, or simply air something happening in and around marketing today that we think is good fodder for discussion. And I'm gonna intro a topic for all of us. So have you both heard about the announcement that Wendy's made about dynamic pricing? Have you guys heard about this?
Mm-hmm. Surge pricing.
Have you heard about this, Dan?
I've slightly, but no.
Okay, so let me give you more information about this. So this is quote from CEO Kirk Tanner during their conference call for investors the other day. So beginning as early as 2025, we will begin testing more enhanced features like dynamic pricing and day part offerings, along with AI-enabled menu changes and suggestive selling. As we continue to show the benefit of this technology in our company-operated restaurants, franchisee interest in digital menu boards should increase, further supporting sales and profit growth across the system. Well, guess what, you guys? There was huge backlash, okay? So lots of backlash ensued with politicians weighing in about price gouging. And then Burger King, this is kind of funny. They tweeted, the only thing surging at BK, and then they had the emoji for fire, is the fire. We don't believe in charging people more when they're hungry. So then with this backlash, Wendy's then issued another statement saying that their original announcement was misconstrued by media outlets as an intent to practice surge pricing. The company assured that there were no plans to raise prices during peak times and that any tested features would benefit customers and employees. Digital menu boards could allow us to change the menu offerings at different times of day and offer discounts and value offers to our customers more easily, particularly in the slower times of day. So what say you to this, gentlemen?
Oopsie. They oopsied it, right? I think they swung. I think so. At United we used to do dynamic pricing, right? And so it works for airlines because you're overbooking seats. It makes sense because you're essentially predicting demand and supply. And then I think what they're basing it off of. Have you guys heard of this bar? There's a bar, I believe, there's 3 or 4 of them where they dynamically change the pricing of drinks based off of the demand for that particular drink. But it's fun because you're sitting there at the bar, you go in there for entertainment, and you're seeing the screen, seeing it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that beer just dropped to $6. I want it right now. You run up, buy it, the price. It's fun, right?
Right.
So I think it's going to be stepwise. So initially you're going to see the technology be built out, and then you're going to see the radius being built. So let's take a, what's a good example? A Frosty. Let's take a Frosty.
Yep.
Frosty used to be $1. Right now it's, I think, $2.50. I think a Frosty's $2.50. I'm pretty certain it's $2.50.
You're probably in the ballpark. Yeah.
Right. And so what's the range going to be? Is it going to be $1 to $2.50? Is the range going to be $1 to $3? If they're saying the range is not going to be $2 to $2.50, there's really no financial advantage or gain besides a demand increase, right? So let's talk about the demand increase. How are you going to be notified to drive the demand, right? So like, are they going to tell everybody, hey, by the way, for the next 15 minutes, Frosties are $1 because our demand's low? No, I don't know. I don't think so, right? So you're going to have to get to the restaurant to identify what the pricing is.
And it could be higher when you get there.
That's right.
But they're saying it won't be higher. But the point is how there's no one's going to download an app that live real time is tracking Wendy's. I may be totally wrong. Real time tracking Wendy's pricing, and then oh my gosh, it dropped by 15 cents. Let me run to my store and let me grab it. Right. So when you think about the true intent, it's very difficult to say, okay, we're going to discount it at certain key times, but you don't know what those times are.
Right.
You have to come in and figure it out. So I don't know. I don't know what the premise. I think a lot of companies, they're trying to find ways to integrate AI. And their companies and create something. So it may be the start of something great. But foundationally, when I go down to restaurants, I always think about the fact there's some really good restaurants that price their product lower in low income areas versus high, and then they price their, and again, that's a different version of pricing, right? And that could be something they're trying to tease out of the demand and the supply, because in low income areas the walk-ins are a lot different, and in high income areas they're a lot different. So maybe they're trying to normalize and fix that. But it's pretty unclear on the success, what they're trying to succeed with.
D, I love that breakdown, Dan. D, you have thoughts?
I do. I feel like we're playing a game show, and the game show is entitled Smart People Doing Very Dumb Things. Right? So I got 3 points. Number one, whenever a brand or business is saying something about price, and it is either consumer facing or ultimately will become consumer facing, and just about everything is, the only thing that consumer or customer wants to hear about price is less or free. That's it.
That's right.
They don't want to hear anything else, anything that even remotely sounds like it's going up. Consumers and customers don't want to hear. So that's no. So the fact that they said it and then tried to, I know what you said, Dan, oopsie, tried to explain it, you're in trouble. Okay. The moment you are talking to your PR team and your agency's like, okay, we have to figure out how we explain this. You're already dead. You're already dead. That's number one. Number two is hubris. So to your point, Dan, it's like, does Wendy's actually believe that there is an addressable market large enough to care about when the fucking price of fries are going down at 11 a.m. on Devon Street? No. Okay. No. We don't care, Wendy's. There's not enough of us that care. So that hubris. Okay. And then the third piece is this. I get the business reason why. And when I was in the tech business, I did a startup actually that was founded first it was founded in Australia, then it came to Irvine, California. It was only in California and a smattering of distribution in Nevada. That brand was Boost Mobile. It then we launched that across the country. It was acquired, yada yada. But so we were eventually acquired by Sprint. So the dude's explaining to me and our executive team, it's like 5 of us. I don't think it was all of us. And we basically were on fire, Dan. So we were like bringing in, and so we wanted to and we were on the network. That was the Nextel network, now owned by Sprint. So we were ready to fill the puppy up because we want to grow. We want to like crush our numbers. And he says to me, hey, DC, let me explain it to you like this. This is why we have to wait before you just start loading people up on there. He says, like you're on a plane and there's an open seat. If we put one of your customers in the seat, it's worth half LTV, long-term value, to us as one of our customers. So we want to keep that seat open to see if we can put one of our customers in it instead of one of your customers. Now, I didn't like it, but I understood it. I did understand it. And by the way, Wendy's, we never said any of that publicly. Okay, we never said any of that. So that's my reaction.
Yeah. A far more accretive thing for them if they wanted to do something is a pricing strategy. And to your point, like it doesn't make sense, is a pricing strategy where we already know McDonald's is under fire for having their prices be so high. They're being hit from multiple places.
Yeah.
I was Wendy's. What I would do, to your point, less or free, I would say for the whole year of 2024, Frosties are $1. And
Yes.
that's it. And you do that release, you're good. Now, Wendy's wins because now everyone's funneling to Wendy's for the $1 Frosty and buying the extremely margined fries and their Baconator and this and that. And like, they essentially just create the demand by doing the right thing. I love Nike has this tenet, which I love. It is do the right thing and the money will follow.
Yeah, that's good. That's
so
good.
I have a couple builds on this wonderful conversation that you all have.
Yes, Larry.
So one is, I go back to what Dan was talking about as it relates to Lego. And as soon as you get, and Dan, we have this, and we talk about this ad infinitum in all of our workshops with our clients and whatnot. As soon as you start delving into price, you're in trouble. As soon as you start leading with price, you're in trouble. So even in the fast food world, if you build your brand, trust me, In-N-Out Burger, again, Dan, I'm in Northern California, so they don't advertise really, and they certainly will never do anything about price, right? They have a great brand. They don't need to. So that's point number one. And so when you're delving into the price, it's just, it's a lose-lose game. And then when you're announcing something like this, D, I love your point about hubris. You shouldn't be talking about price, but you're sort of trying to say, well, Uber does this, they sort of trying to get to other categories. Again, Dan, as you mentioned, airlines have been doing this forever, really, for a long, long time. But at the end of the day, if you're a consumer, this is a business. So if they're doing this, they're trying to make more money. Who are we kidding, right? That's what they're doing. So the whole thing smacks of a big oopsie, to use your language, Dan, because this isn't something, if they were going to do this, like DC's point about Boost Mobile, maybe you test it out in a few areas. By putting forth this big announcement, you deserve the backlash that you've earned.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Yeah. I mean, I just think there's so many better ways to go about it. You have to understand your market. The market right now doesn't want to hear like that. The market, the consumer, you're a consumer business if you're Wendy's, right? You're not a B2B business. You're
exactly.
Consumer, if you told a B2B company that you're integrating AI, you're like, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. You're telling your consumer you're going to change the menu prices. Let's just run a survey across 100 people as an enormous company, right? I guarantee you many of those people are going to be like, I don't understand what you're saying. All I heard is your prices might be higher.
Exactly.
We increased it from like $1 to $2.50. It's such a convoluted message. That's why I always say for marketers, like the day where you can go into a room and impress people with just big words is gone.
Yeah.
If you can't deliver cash to the business, that's really what matters. Now, there's some businesses that far exclude that. Like you look at big impression businesses like a Nike or, like Amazon, but they have the cash in the bank and the impression volume behind them that they can continue to generate. But if you look at Apple just killed their whole car concept yesterday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Focusing on other things. And that was a $10 billion project to go into something that matters. So the fact that companies like Wendy's can't recognize that nobody cares about AI-based pricing and whatever audience segment that they interviewed was not the consumer, and they could have just made Frosties $1. It's sad.
I love that idea. I'm just going to say this quickly. One, what Apple didn't do when they killed the car project yesterday, to your point, Dan, is they did not say, and therefore we're going to dynamic pricing on our MacBooks and iPads. They did not do that. Okay, they did not do that. But thinking more about Wendy's attempting to use Uber as an analog, like, hey, don't think of us as just Wendy's out here by ourselves.
Yeah,
Uber is also doing the same thing. I must channel the inimitable poet named Cat Williams. Okay, Cat Williams, who's on Club Shay Shay. Cat Williams has a joke, Dan and Larry, and his joke is about a Chrysler 300. He says that a Chrysler 300 looks just like a Phantom until a Phantom pulls up. Okay, right?
Oh,
And this is what like Wendy's, you're no Uber. So stop trying to be Uber. Just stop.
That's right. And by the way, we all mentioned Apple. Did they ever do anything on price? The answer is hell no.
now they do it in a very intelligent way,
They
right?
do it in an intelligent way, yes.
They do it. They introduce a product that's a digital product because they know that the physical product's their gateway. They bring in a digital edition product, so let's call it the Apple Family Plan. They introduce it at a price that seems extremely palatable, and they increase it by 25 cents.
That's right.
75 cents, $1. Yes. And before you know it, you're paying $34.99 and all your images. So they do it in an intelligent way where your demand for the product and your affinity for the product continues to grow. So your value for the price continues to grow, or to DC's point, the inflation catches up. But as a restaurant concept,
yeah,
it's very, very, very odd.
No. Dan, I know you know this. I just want to make sure the brand nerds understand what you said. What you just said is that pricing strategy, which clearly you explained it brilliantly. That's exactly what they did. But where I was going is it's never part of their brand positioning. They never do anything with price as part of their brand positioning. That's what I just want to be clear about that. That's what I meant.
No, you're right. You're right. And the one thing they tried to do, and they failed at, they tried to get the Apple Car under $100,000.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Yeah.
And they said that was one of those reasons that they weren't able to. I don't know if they said it or it was speculated that they were unable to get it to that particular price point because they know the demand is there, right? Like you roll up to a Wendy's and a fry is $12, you're going to be like, why in the world did I choose? I don't want to cancel my order. Like I don't want that.
Hey D, Dan has been amazing, Dan. This has been so much fun. This is blown by. We're really at the show close, and Dan, what we do at the end here is DC and I posit our learnings, and we'll give you the opportunity to also, before we leave, to share anything that you've learned from this wonderful conversation. So I lead off, and there's a multiple learnings, but I'm going to keep it to 5. So, and it's funny because I have something from the very beginning of what Dan said to almost what he said just a minute or two ago. So number 1 is, as brand nerds, as it relates to your career and your business or marketing career, he tried different things, started in retail. You tried different things and you eventually find what you love. That's a huge one. That's number 1. Number 2, like Dan's parents, brand nerds, what are you doing to pay it forward to help others? 3, like Dan, find your Guido. Mentors are so important. So important. That's number 3. Number 4, when you start a business, make sure the business mechanics work before you invest in the business so you don't end up doing wed sim like Dan did. So he made that mistake. Don't you make it. And number 5, and Dan just said this literally a minute or two ago, the best marketers ultimately deliver cash to the business because they understand the fundamentals and they understand the value proposition that you'll pay more money for as a consumer if you're getting great value back. And the best marketers really understand that whole value equation. So those are my 5 great learnings. D, the floor is yours.
I'll pick up on where you were and then I'll go on to mine. Those are great, Larry. Cash rules everything around me. Cream. Shout out Wu-Tang. RZA. Okay. Dan, at this juncture in the show, what I yearn for is some connection with our guests, beyond just what they say, but what they mean. And also by virtue of nonverbal communication, some things that they are saying that maybe did not have words, but that were nonetheless communicated. And after that, I attempt to make my assessment of what is it that this human has been put on this planet to gift the rest of us with? What are they teaching us on their journey? And that's a lot, brother, to try to assess in the short amount of time that we have. But sometimes it hits me. And so I'm going to attempt to share now with you what's hit me about you. So I want to go back to the question that we ask in 5 questions about your first brand love, the thing that really hit you. And you started with Legos, and then you said, I'm going to hop around a little bit, and you mentioned Rolex. And you said, what happens with Rolex is when you're a kid, 1, 2 years old, and you're looking up at a Rolex clock at an airport or somewhere else, and you're asking your parents, like, what's that? And your parents are explaining this to you. You said, Rolex is not trying to get you to buy a watch at 1. They're making an impression with you at 1 so you can buy a watch when you are 21 or in your 20s or whenever. So what I took away from that is Rolex is playing the long game. They're playing the long game. The next thing is when we asked the question, what are you most proud of? You said, I know this is probably not, but my parents, Muhammad and Shista. And you explain how your father, how he finished second of everyone who took a test back home, second. And he did not necessarily do all the things that he wanted to do in Pakistan and here in America, but he did this. He said, you know what? For my kids, wherever you want to go to school, you go. And that was Muhammad and Shaista playing the long game. So this is the second example of playing the long game. Now, brand nerds, we get to spend a little time with our guests before we roll camera. So before we start the show. And so Dan was kind of looking over his shoulder. He was kind of looking at, he says, I get emails, I get 8 a minute. So, and then so then we go on air. And then Larry does the opening, the brilliant opening. And Dan, your career took off fast. It took off really, really fast. You earned that, brother.
Thank you.
But as we were beginning to start, I saw Larry will know this phrase. I saw the iPhone prayers happening. I saw you look down, and I thought to myself, okay, am I gonna have to say to this brother, yo, man, we're doing a podcast. You're gonna have to stay here. What I got from that was that there's some impatience, like hey, I'm ready to move. I'm ready to move. And then I asked you about the question I don't remember what question it was, but that you answered. You said Muslims, they kind of in the dating realm, they don't do it like y'all do it. Like you're not like 2-3 years, meet the parents, that kind of thing. Like we're gonna do it. So there's this impatience and speed about you, my brother, cast up against this long game of the brand that you love, Rolex, and your parents. And so I'm thinking, Then I notice in the background off your shoulder, so brand nerds, you can't see this, is a boxing glove. And I thought, I've met many people in my day, Dan. I've worked with many people in my day, famous people. All right. I have been in the room with a billionaire before. So I've met all the peoples. They don't impress me. No more than someone sweeping the on the corner. No, I don't think of them as higher or lower. They're the same to me. But there is one dude that I have met and I've worked with who is different, and that's Muhammad Ali. Like he is a different guy. And that boxing glove had me think, that was my connection. So I'm going to read you a quote from Muhammad Ali that I think starts to touch upon you. And then I'm going to articulate or attempt to what I think makes you special. One of the things makes you special. So here's the quote. They're asking him, like, what do you want people to think about you? Like when you're up out of here, what do you want to think? He says, I'd like them to say he took a few cups of love. He took 1 tablespoon of patience. He took a teaspoon of generosity, 1 pint of kindness. He took 1 quart of laughter, 1 pinch of concern. Then he mixed with willingness and happiness. He added lots of faith and he stirred it up well. Okay. Impatience and patience. Here's what I think your gift is, brother. You are gloriously, impatiently patient. And I think that's what we can learn from you, my brother.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. That was incredibly kind. Honestly, it was very, very,
That's awesome.
it was very kind.
Hey, Dan,
Well-
you didn't know you were hitting the DC couch. That's what happens at our show at the end. At the end. So, but he always has a truly inimitable way of finding the best in folks. And Dan, this has been such a delightful conversation. Anything that you want to share before we close about this wonderful conversation we've had?
Oh, I want to meet you guys in person. So whenever you guys are in town, we'll have to go out, get a coffee or get a drink or something. It was absolutely wonderful. I mean, I think you guys have very open hearts, and I think that's what leads to success at the end of the day. So appreciate you guys and your time. But yeah, whenever you're in town, please.
We'll make that happen. We will make that happen.
Yeah.
We will make that happen. All right.
Love Laguna Beach. Love Laguna Beach.
There you go. I love Laguna too. Place called Nick's. Gotta check it out. Must have.
Let's do it. Let's do it, right? All right, Jay, this is the show close. Thanks for listening to Brands, Beats, and Bites, Brand Nerds. The executive producers are Jeff Shirley, Daryl D.C. Cobbin, Larry Taman, Haley Cobbin, Jake Tate, and Tom Bureau. That is he. And if you do like this podcast, please subscribe and share it. For those on Apple Podcasts, if you are so inclined, we love those excellent reviews. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to next time where we will have more insightful and enlightening talk about marketing.